Damn. Staring at this yellow-haired girl, Mr. Jones strikes up a conversation with her black hair. Flamingo dance, you know she dances while her father plays guitar. She's suddenly beautiful. Oh, want something beautiful. Man, I wish I was beautiful. So come dance the silent dance in the morning. Sha la 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 la, yeah. Uh-huh. Coda Maria. What's up?
Hey.
The music stopped all of a sudden, damn it.
Mr. Jones and me.
Oh my God, I love Mr. Jones. How are you doing, Alana?
Awesome. Darius, how are you doing?
Oh, God. A lot better now that I started singing that song, and I was doing it before. So what can I say? Oh, welcome to the Greatness Machine once again, my dear.
Why, thank you. What an honor to be here.
You ready to perform some greatness with me?
Ready to make greatness.
Let's make some greatness. Guys, welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mirshahzadeh. And boy, do we have a special guest once again. Part 2 of Alana Winter. Alana, welcome to the show once again. I'm so pumped to have you here.
Thank you. I'm pumped to be here. I'm looking at all the pink unicorns in the background.
You know, they're just doing their thing. I was looking up what hot pink color means, and it has all these great descriptions around that hot pink symbolizes beauty and happiness, and I was like, oh, that's why I like this color so much. So it is what it is. So do you know what I'd like to do is kind of, play a little catch up, tell the audience, a little bit about the last show, because I thought it was such a great show. We had so much fun talking about your entrepreneurial upbringing, your dad and the video business, and then all the stuff about Stiletto Spy School. But we didn't, it was so great. I was like, oh, we got to do a part 2. So here we are doing part 2 of the show. Do you mind if I give a little bit of background on you for the audience that didn't hear the first show, and then I can force them to go listen to the first show? Is that cool?
Please do.
So you guys, the first show was amazing. If you haven't heard it, you need to go check it out. It's in podcast and it's on live stream. You check it out on anywhere where podcasts are, on all the podcast platforms. But we had a great show, and I said, "Oh, Alana, we got to do this again. I want to finish, because we literally spent a lot of time on how you became an entrepreneur and your experiences of building your businesses and the trials and tribulations. But we just got started. When we just got started, the show was over because I had a hard stop. But yeah, here we are today. We're going to be diving into a lot of the work you're working on right now. But before we go there, I do want to kind of go over your bio for those people that didn't hear the last show. If you didn't, go hear the last show, and then you can press play on this one and continue on the new show. Guys, Alana is a serial entrepreneur. She's a master coach and team facilitator. She's the founder of the MI6 Academy and Stiletto Spy School, where participants learn to see challenges in new ways, overcome fears, blow through obstacles, make calmer, clear decisions, and achieve success in the boardroom and life. She's recognized for extensive work in EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, and YPO forums. And here she is today on the Greatness Machine once again. So, how'd I do? Did that work?
Got it.
Just crushing it. So, man, we haven't talked in a couple months. What have you been up to? It's a new world.
What have I been up to? It is a new world. Oh my God. I've been traveling. Through pandemic, I was like, I am so over all this traveling. I'm so happy at home. I've discovered I'm a homebody. And as soon as things opened up, it was like, what was I thinking?
I know. You're like out of sight, out of mind. And then you do it and you're like, this is the best. You're like, oh, more airports.
So Darius, I basically broke into tears when I walked into an airport for the first time. One of the things during pandemic, right? There should be hashtag things I had time to do during pandemic. I counted my boarding passes. I had been on 100 flights in 12 months leading up to pandemic.
Wow.
Right. And then of course, 0 for 14 months or so. Yeah. And so the first time, being on 100 flights, it's like, I feel like airports are my home, right? I know every airport. I know exactly how to navigate them, what I want to buy to snack on, and exactly where that shop is and what row it's on, right? So I walked into an airport for the first time and I broke into tears.
Oh my gosh.
So it was two things. It was a couple of things, actually. It was, first of all, realizing how I had taken for granted the freedom to just roam around this amazing world that we have. And the other thing was seeing everybody there, the humanity of it, and everybody trying to get through, and seeing like the moms, everybody in masks, and moms with wailing kids, and the TSA agents doing their best, and somebody that was supposed to have their COVID test from the day before, whatever, and their COVID test, the dates are wrong, and they're yelling at the TSA agents, and the TSA agents are like, we're just trying to do our job. And it was just the humanity of everybody together. It was super emotional.
You're in New York, so were you at JFK?
That first flight actually was out of Newark, which usually I would fly out of JFK or LaGuardia, but it happened to be in Newark.
I'm a fan of Newark just because it's easier to get into the city if you're like going Midtown, which I know is near and dear to you. But the reason I asked was that so they required that you showed COVID, that you had a clean COVID test. Is that internet?
No, it was just depending on where you were traveling to, right? Countries have different restrictions.
Oh.
People that were going to countries that had that, and then they, weren't letting them in because they didn't have the right restrictions. And it was just everybody just trying to get by and do their best. And people.
Oh my gosh. So it's funny. I didn't cry, but I overboarded the travel. I did a bunch of business trips. And then in one weekend I went to, this happened on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Monday. I went to San Francisco. I saw my forum in San Francisco on Friday. We had a forum on Friday all day. And then we did this really fun journey group on Friday night. And then I went and saw down to a wedding, and I saw my mom, sister, brother, stepbrother, stepdad, and my niece and nephew and my brother-in-law and I'd seen my mom and my stepdad, but I hadn't seen my kids my niece and nephew and my brother and sister since pre-COVID. Then I went and saw my forum in LA that I hadn't physically seen any of these people since March last year. And it was like kind of overwhelming. Like it was so weird just to hug people and to see people and embrace people. And I was like, man, it was really cool. And I kind of had the same thing you did, which I was like, man, this is really cool to see people you care about, and I don't know if you felt that way when you were traveling, but maybe I think I just put those words in your mouth. That's how I felt though. And then I just went to vacation a couple weeks later, which was 2 weeks later. And I went and saw my best friend and my godson. And so all these people I haven't interacted with for all these months. And you want to know the one thing that stood out to me?
Yes.
More. Okay. Sorry. I want to make sure you heard that. Was giving people hugs. That was like the thing. That was the biggest thing. I have never given that big a hugs. I mean, I have, but to that many people who I hadn't seen in so long, just to grab them and hug them, And I was like, man, ain't nothing but the real thing, Like Zoom can't recreate this, So
well, in New York, okay, so we've had outdoor dining and stuff, and all winter. I can't even believe that I did this, but I wore so many layers of clothes that I could barely move, and like warmers inside my boots, and sat outside and had dinner outside in 15-degree weather. But once the vaccination rates really started getting up, and it felt like New York was really open, or one time I was walking down the street and it seemed like it just hit like that. And I was walking down the street, it was with one of my friends, and we walked by this bar, and there were all these people outside. And I remember I turned to my friend and I said to her, I said, you should probably hold me back because I'm about to run up to strangers and just go and pet them and hug them.
It's amazing, right? It shows you as humans what we need, Yeah. Yeah. It's so cool. And so have you been traveling for business then, I take it? Or personal or both?
Mostly personal. So that first trip when I walked into the airport and cried, that first trip was to Sun Valley, and I was going out and visiting a friend out there. That was just purely vacay. I've done one trip for business down to Raleigh, North Carolina. No, down to Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina, where I was running a retreat down there, and I'll do another business trip coincidentally down to the Raleigh area also this coming week. But the rest of it, I've actually been traveling for fun. So I went out to Aspen. I just went and spent a week with friends out there. I've been down to see my family a couple of times, and yeah, who I hadn't seen since December of 2019.
Yeah, it's I don't know where the world goes from here, man, but I hope it gets a lot more humanitarian with people realizing that we all need each other, and
Yeah.
that's yeah. I that's where I keep landing on is, there's a lot of bullshit out there around what makes us different, and people see, that tends to be a lot of rhetoric and then in the media and news and, fringe sources out there. And I'm like, yeah, no, we're all like, that's not the truth. The truth is everyone wants to, have friendship, and they want to connect, and they want to like see each other, and they want to have picnics, and they want to go walk, and they want to talk about life, and they want to connect. And that's, they want to go dance, like that's where I'm at right now. So I'm with you.
Darius, that is so the universal truth. I've been really lucky in work that I've done. I've been able to go to places like Pakistan that, American tourists don't get to go to. I've been able to go to places as a New York, not American, but New York Jewish woman, be able to go to places like Abu Dhabi and work with groups of all male entrepreneurs, right? And so Tel Aviv, India, but oh my gosh, all over, Istanbul, UK, etc., and work across so many different cultures. And yeah, it's definitely all the same. It's all that people want. We put up these artificial barriers and these differences, but it's all that people want. And we know this on a deep level, but ego steps back in. So I was in a cab just a few days ago, and one cab driver is honking at another, and they're cutting each other off, and they roll the window down, and they're yelling, and they're cursing at each other. And I said to the cab driver, I was like, well, so much for that. All the love that, we all learned during the
pandemic. You're like, human. Well, you're in New York too. So it's like, New York's back.
partly it was that too.
You're like, Uber drivers are gone. The cabbies own the streets again. That's amazing. So you said you were just in Vail. That was personal? Is that correct?
I was in Aspen, actually.
Yeah, Aspen. Excuse me.
I was there for a week. I went to see 2 Dead Mouse shows at the Belly Up. It was July 4th weekend. Aspen's an awesome place to be for July 4th week. And it was there was a lot of dancing and a lot of fun.
Oh man, I haven't seen. I saw. I went and saw a couple. That's one of the things that was new for post-COVID too. Is we went dancing. We went and saw. Tiesto. Have you seen him before? So I went and saw Tiesto in Austin a couple weeks ago with an EO, former EO president here in Austin, and then the next night I went and saw Dave Guetta in Vegas. Yeah, that was like I this is partially why I was burnt out before my trip. I just took a vacation to Montana, but and then I was like, I haven't danced in so long. It was so weird seeing people like out celebrating life and partying and having fun. I was like, I love doing this stuff, at least a little bit, a lot can be tiring, but a little bit, like I like staying up all night and dancing and enjoying myself. So yeah. Next time, maybe if I come into New York, we could go rock out and go see some DJs or something. That'd be fun. So I want to talk to you about MI6. Can we go there? Because we didn't talk too much about that in the last show, and it sounds like you're doing some really amazing stuff. That first of all, can you kind of describe how did MI6 come to be, and what is it, and what are you doing with it? I know you talked a little bit about it on the last show, but I want to give a little bit of background, and then we could dive into like what you're doing with it right now.
Yeah, totally. So, Darius, when I was a little girl, I watched all of the James Bond movies with my dad, right? And I loved the adventure of it, and I loved those characters and the Bond girls. etc. And I thought, but I was a little girl who wore a white dress and didn't ride my tricycle, and how one day I would grow up and I'd get to be as tough and cool as all those characters in the movies. So I thought there must be a school they go to. So I used to look through the yellow pages for the school. So be badass in a cat suit school. Couldn't find it. So that's what I built. And it's funny, how I decided to build it. I was talking to, I just sent a passing note. Hey, do you hear an echo, by the way, or is it just on my end?
There's a little echo, a little bit, but are you hearing me echo or you're hearing yourself echo?
I'm hearing myself echo.
Yeah, I'm hearing you're a little, it's a little bit of an echo.
Let's see if it's.
Yeah, don't worry, we'll edit this out.
Okay, cool. Let's see. Putting in AirPods and see if that helps any. Does that take it off?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, cool. Okay, so anyway, so I thought about this idea and I had actually mentioned it to a friend, and she was super excited about it. And I was like, yeah, but only I want to do that. Who else will want to do that? And then the more people I talked to, everybody said yes, but there was a killer moment. Actually, this is funny. The friend that I went to visit out in Sun Valley, I was sitting with her and her mom, who was in her 80s at the time. And I told her about this idea about building this school where you could go and learn how to be a Bond girl and learn all these crazy skills and everything. And she's really into it. And her mom leans across the table and says to me, "Can I come too?" I looked at her mom, who was in her 80s. I was like, you know what? If it's rocking you, I'm doing it. So that was the moment I decided that I was going to build this school where normal people like you and I could learn all the James Bond skills. But I was like, okay, well, how do I do that? Well, first of all, what are these skills and who can I get to teach them? And I need to, it needs to be the real skills. This isn't going to be some pretend thing or something where you watch other people do them. So I spent 2 years tracking down experts, and I tracked down, okay, well, who knows these kinds of things? Navy SEALs know these kinds of things, Russian Spetsnaz, Israeli Mossad agents, CIA, FBI. And so I was trying to find all these people. I didn't have any connections. I mean, I wasn't a spy, although I do sometimes tell people that, because everybody asks me, like, I'm so deep undercover. Spy School is my cover. But the truth that I was not really a spy. So I had to go and find all these people and figure out. Then also, this isn't going to be something where like you're going to do some 6-month program, right? I wanted it to have day-long programs or a weekend-long program. So P.S. after 2 years of finding all these experts and narrowing down the skills and really working with them to figure out how you can get, what are the essentials of hand-to-hand combat? So you don't have to go and study martial arts for 6 years, right? Like, what are the 3 key points that you need to know? If you want to learn how to shoot a gun, again, this isn't something where you're going to go and take a 6-month course, which is phenomenal, right? But if you just want to get the basics and walk away with some real knowledge about that, what can you teach? So it was working with these instructors to get concise information delivered in a way that was fun and approachable for you and I, who are not experts in these fields, who have no background. So it was concise, it was useful, it was fun. And there was a greater takeaway, because what I found is as I was building this, and to build this, I had to go and start to work with all these experts because I had to learn the skills, right? Like I would say to all of them, like, if you can teach me, you could teach anybody, right? Because I'm coming in with zero experience. So in working with all of them, it struck me that all of these skills I was learning were a metaphor for ways to approach things in business, in life, etc. Did we talk about what happened with my business partner on the last show?
My recollection was, and I don't know, we've talked a couple times. So you had a business partner on the video business that it went sideways, and then they bought you out. Am I remembering that properly?
He was embezzling.
Yeah. We talked about that a little bit. That's correct.
Okay. And it was because of the stuff that I was learning as I was prepping for spy school that I was able to figure out that he was embezzling, because I totally would have missed the clues otherwise.
Wait, so you were building this while you were still in the other business?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Well,
I didn't
I was in the other business. I started to study these things. I wasn't sure yet that I was going to build the spy school program, but I was starting to study some of the skills for it. So one of the things I was studying, I was taking these courses in hand-to-hand combat, which is kind of crazy if you look at me or know me. Like, I'm the last person you would think is taking hand-to-hand combat lessons.
So what's your favorite? So if you're in trouble, what's your favorite move that you bust out for hand-to-hand combat? I mean, there's obviously everyone has a favorite move.
Yeah, the favorite move is whatever is available.
So you don't have. I mean, I get it. If you're in survival mode, whatever, you use what you got, but
Totally.
you got to have a go-to move. I'm not letting you off.
No.
Really?
No, so Darius. And this is a really important shift in thinking, okay? Because you're asking me about hand-to-hand combat, but again, let's look at life overall. So overall, if we approach things as I've got my go-to move, then we're always looking for places that fits in, as opposed to the mindset of looking at where I am and what's available here, and knowing that whatever is available in front of me is what I have to work with, and I'm going to pick whatever is available and work with that. Okay. When we think about a favorite move, it locks us into something. Yeah. And it's so interesting. These are things that are the subtle lessons from spy school that I picked up that were totally game-changing for me. And what was interesting, as I built this, I thought, okay, I've been studying these things, working with all these instructors, and I thought these nuances are really subtle. I thought I'll build this experience. People will come in for a day and they'll never pick up on these subtle nuances. They'll just learn stuff and have fun. At the end of the very first program that I ran, I sat around. The first program I ran was a program for women, because we do a program called Stiletto Spy School. That's when we have all female groups. Right. And there's a bit of a different dynamic when it's all women and we get to have conversations about power, femininity, etc. MI6 Academy is the umbrella company that we do corporate events, any mixed gender events, etc. But at that very first program, I sat, and it was one day, and we did a circle at the end and asked what people's takeaway, and I was blown away by the nuances they picked up and the way that they were connecting the dots to the applications in their life and business.
Interesting. So and I'm going to go back to the what's your move question. The reason I asked it actually was, I don't know if you know this, I was a wrestler in college, right?
Okay, no.
Yeah, I wrestled in high school and college, and in wrestling you have a move, right? And you're always looking to set that move up. And it was funny, like I never thought about, and really to be a really good wrestler, you only need like 3 moves. Right. But you're always looking for them and you're always setting them up and doing it. And I realized that I never thought about till you said it, is that, and I'm a fairly improvisational person, but in business, I have my moves. And I hadn't thought about like this thing where it's like, well, why not just be, work with what you have in front of you. Right. Which we do tend to do this as entrepreneurs but I've always kind of done it in the frame of, well, I want to still apply my move to that, So I could see how people get in there and they're probably out of their comfort zone, right? And you're teaching them things that they have no muscle memory around, they have no experience around. It's a totally new experience, and they're seeing themselves get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and then applying these totally, like, I guess, out of body type of experiences, although it's in body. But you're a little out of body, and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know hand-to-hand combat. Like if you're working with Mossad, or you're working, like I did a thing through EO with a Navy SEAL where we're shooting literally a sniper rifle. Like that's a weird experience, right? So you get comfortable with the uncomfortable, and to your point, using what you have. How did you, when you would do that one training, what happened after that? Like people get this feeling, get this experience, and then that's their takeaway. Then what?
Oh, there are a bunch of takeaways, right? So that's one of them. I would say that what's interesting, there was a moment, and this was all, building Spy School completely was a learning experience for me. Yeah. And I remember one particular moment. I was in Las Vegas, and I was also doing a women's program in Las Vegas. And I had this group of women, and in the women's program, as opposed to in the corporate program, I bring in burlesque dancers and strippers to teach classes in the women's program. So there's this woman, Kalita, who's great, based out of San Francisco, hot pink feathers, and plug for Kalita. And she had just done a class for these women in burlesque dance, fun, sexy dance moves. And she's got feathers in her hair and fishnet stockings and hot pink glitter lipstick. And while she's got her class going on, in the other corner of the room, I have 3 of my other instructors. There's a former retired recon Marine, somebody from the Joint Terrorism Task Force, and a law enforcement officer. And they're about to teach a class in edged weapons, i.e. knife fighting, right? So
Wow.
They're in the corner and they're setting up a display of all kinds of amazing knives and edged weapons for their class. As Kalita finishes, Joe, the recon Marine, comes up to Kalita and says she's about to leave and says, "Ma'am," super respectfully, "Ma'am, would you like to stay and take the class with the rest of the women?" And she says, "Oh, I'd love to." So in her hot pants and fishnet stockings with feathers in her hair and high heels, she takes the knife fighting class with all the women. At the end of the class, to my total surprise, because this was totally not planned, Kalita and Joe stand up spontaneously in front of the class and talk about the similarities between what they had taught. I grab a notebook, Darius. I'm scribbling notes. I'm like, I have no idea what's happening here, but oh my God. Right? And I'm scribbling notes. And what was so interesting, right? So Joe, the recon Marine, teaches them that when you walk into a setting, you always stop in the doorway and you scope out what's in front of you, right? You get very present with who's in the room. You do as much sort of observation as you can, and then you take what you've observed and then plug that in and analyze it. You don't jump to conclusions. You see everything that's there. You see where your exits are. You plan out what your moves are going to be. You decide when you're going to strike, and when you strike, how it is forceful and in a moment. And Kalita talks about, because I'm a burlesque dancer, she's up on stage by herself. She's done all of her choreography. She's built her costumes. There's no backup. She gets up on stage and she walks out on that stage, and the first thing she does is stop and take a moment and scope out the room and scope out who's in the audience and see what the dynamics are and see where the opportunities are and see if there's anything that looks dodgy, see everything that's going on. And she talked about, in her choreography, right, the power of a gaze, and when she looks away and then she pins somebody with her gaze, and how powerful that is. It was amazing.
Wow.
Right? So as I was developing this program, I was learning from the instructors, but what I realized was that across all the fields, whether it was the poker players talking about how they stay in the game, the bartenders, because we have top mixologists that we do martini mixology, right? As any of my friends will tell you if they're out with me and I'm ordering a martini, how particular I will be about it, because I've learned from the best. But the bartenders will tell you, the top mixologists, they are standing behind the bar and they are scoping out the room. And 9 times out of 10, they know exactly what drink you're going to order before you walk up to the bar.
Wow. How, just because mannerisms, or there's a type,
Yep.
She's a kettle and soda, he's a martini dry. Is it just are people that predictable?
They are, I tell you, the top mixologists are, it's like talking to the top FBI negotiators, the way that they read people, the way that they're watching every expression, what they're reading in your posture, in your gait. They're getting so much information. We telegraph so much that unless you're trained, just goes right by you, but they're trained, right? And,
wow.
and all that it really is, it seems so mysterious, but the real thing is that they learn to quiet their minds and be extraordinarily present and just take in what's there. And there's so much that's just given to you. You just don't pay attention to it.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And so it's almost, taking these lessons from these different fields, right? Where I guess part of it is your perception around what's at stake, right? And if you're a top mixologist, at that point, there's probably lots of pride around this, right? Where you're like, I'm so good at my job, I can tell what people's drinks are, and I'm going to see how good I am at actually predicting this, right? That's how I would be because I'm competitive, but maybe they see it differently.
Yeah. They would see it differently because I can tell you that would get in the way.
Oh, really? So theirs is just fully, this is just a true, like, I'm just feeling the moment and I can see them and read them and understand it. And there's no other outside influences outside of just being present in the moment and experience.
There's no ego involved. It's extraordinary. I'll tell you a specific moment out of all the things that we do. And remember, I built Spy School because it was all the stuff I wanted to learn. So One of the things I most wanted to learn was deception detection, which came from when I was a little girl and every time like 5, and I tried to lie to my dad. There's a famous family photograph of me. I'm 4 years old and I have chocolate all over my face. My mom had left me in the room with a box of chocolates and told me not to touch them. And she came back into the room and asked me if I had touched the chocolates. I'm like,
Nope. Yeah, right. Yeah, you did.
And I had chocolate. So she snapped a Polaroid, right? I had chocolate, of course, all over my face. So
I love it.
But I just thought that my parents, especially my dad, I thought he was a magician and that he knew when I was lying, right? Because I'm such a terrible liar.
That's amazing.
So when I built Spy School and I'm getting to work with the FBI and the CIA, and I have one of my great instructors is a dear friend of mine, Joe Navarro, is a famous top FBI interrogator. And I had this other woman, Heidi, who was an undercover. And I remember one time I was sitting with this woman, Heidi, and I was like, how do you know? She was this little blonde who had infiltrated gangs in New York City, had this crazy story. I was like, how do you know? Like when you're interrogating somebody, like what's going on? And she says to me, well, I sit back in my chair, all the way back in my chair, with my spine straight but relaxed, my feet flat on the floor, my hands lightly resting. And I close my eyes and I breathe and I'm thinking, wait, am I like freaking listening to my meditation teacher?
Yeah. I'm like, are we meditating?
Right. And I realized, Darius, in that moment, because I would go through, I'd been going to ashrams like forever and trying to meditate and I could never get it. And I learned quiet mind and meditation from the CIA and the FBI and the undercover experts at Spy School, because that's what they do.
Wow.
It's quiet mind. It's not jumping to conclusions. It's zero ego, because that will get in the way. And when we want to be clever, we want to be right, we miss the stuff in front of us.
Wow. Oh man, you're rocking my world right now. So, so with the MI6 Spy School, you've now is that obviously Stiletto Spy School is the female gender eccentric version of it. MI6 Spy School is corporate. Is that that's your primary focus right now? I know earlier we were talking about some of the work you're doing. Is that within the realm of MI6 Spy School, or is that outside of that?
I split my time in thirds. So I spend a third of my time doing one-on-one coaching. I work with CEOs, mostly. I work with some other C-suite leaders. I've worked with some top corporate lawyers, et cetera, but mostly CEOs, founders. And in that coaching, I'm helping people get clarity on their vision and values, find their voice. And that's actually so much of what we have in common, why we even started talking, that focus on values, right? And how they find their voice and magnify those values and create impact in the world. And I like to work with leaders who are in a position where they ripple down and create that kind of impact. But part of the work that I'm doing with them is exactly this takeaway of learning to get present and quiet. Because when you can get present and quiet, you can not only take in the information of what's happening around you, but that's the only way you can actually see and tune into what's happening inside of you, right? That's the only way you can see and tune into your own emotions and values and what's truly going on, not all the monkey mind voices inside your head. So
it was funny. I was having a conversation. I mentioned earlier, I was in Montana, and I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine, and we were talking about, I'm going to go a little sideways on you here. Just in the world of entrepreneurism, there's been such a celebration around ego, right? That and this is I think this is becoming totally outdated, by the way. But over the last 2 years, I think 2 years is when I've picked up on this. There's this, like, I don't want to say it's toxic ego, but it kind of is, where it's like, push yourself to the limits, and like this, like, you have to wake up, rise and grind and wake up early and crush it. There's this whole like, and I'm going to talk some shit right now on Dave Goggins, because Dave Goggins is like the king of this, and everyone loves Dave Goggins. And so I had a formate that sent me this Dave Goggins thing, and I was like, yeah, I swear to God, I said this. I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing any of that. I was like, it was like all about like pushing through the pain. I'm like, dude, I spent 5 years running through the pain. Like, I'm like, I have zero interest in doing that. And what I started talking to him about was, I said, what's interesting to me is, can't believe I'm doing this right now, microdosing. I'm like, I'm way more interested in microdosing,
I picked up on that when you said we had a journey on Friday night, Darius.
That may not have been micro, but I said I'm way more interested in that, because, and a lot of some listeners might be like, what the hell is he talking about? And I'm like, there's all this amazing information out there around the parts of our brain that are not ego driven, that are much more in tune with the deeper why, and getting access to that. And people in Silicon Valley have been experimenting with this pretty aggressively, probably for a decade now. And I actually, all it is an enhancement around consciousness, right? That's what I think it boils down to. Is this is a tool for playing with consciousness. Meditation is a tool for playing with consciousness. Deep cold plunges is a tool for playing with consciousness. Breathwork is a tool for playing with consciousness. And I look at this whole idea around conscious leadership, and I'm like, these are all just, tools to play in that realm that is way different than ego-driven leadership, which I feel like we're moving pretty aggressively away from at this point. What are your thoughts on these things?
So agree. And so the way that psychedelics are so coming into the mainstream now so fast is absolutely fascinating to me. Michael Pollan, who's was the food critic and who wrote How to Change Your Mind, that was a New York Times bestseller, just has a new book out, Your Mind on Plants. And so the New York Times, Forbes, Business Insider, in the last month has been awash. There's not a day that goes by that there's not at least one article on psychedelics in every one of those publications, if not multiple ones. I personally am a fan also. And, it's interesting how you tie that. I think that playing with consciousness has been something, and we are so off topic now. We'll come back eventually, I guess, to the other way I spend my time. We'll come back to business. Maybe.
Sorry, but I totally derailed
this is all good. No, this is all good. So I sent you actually a text message. I don't know if you saw that when I heard you say journey. I don't know if you're looking at your text messages while we're talking.
I tried not to when I saw it, and I was like, all right, I'll see if I can.
There you go. So it's playing with consciousness, but it is back to what you talked about earlier about how we all want the same things. And I think that the beauty of any of that stuff is that that's what it ties us into. It ties us into that. It shows us that illusory nature of the separation that we experience, right? And in terms of leadership, so to really carry a string together for people who are listening. So there's the MI6, there's the one-on-one stuff, and the stuff that the other third is facilitating conversations with leadership teams. So I get to get in deep with leadership teams on how they're running their companies. And companies that are building a culture of rise and grind, holy crap, who can work that way? That's terrible. It's just, I always call it airline rules, right? You get on an airplane and I say, right, put your own oxygen mask on first. Well, if you're grinding yourself to pieces, you are not putting your oxygen mask on. And so leaders can't work that way. and to expect humans to work that way. It's very much, if we just look at humans in this very cold way of what you're producing for me, right? Just as, that's it, just as a production unit, as opposed to any humanity, companies are going to wonder why they have incredible turnover and terrible culture. Right?
Yeah.
And
no, please. Sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, no. And then also and then you set up something up where the employees only look at you as a paycheck and there's zero loyalty. And so it's just a terrible way to exist at all. So companies that have a different kind of consciousness are going to build a better culture and be able to build something in the world. And humans that have a different kind of consciousness and see more about the ways that we are interrelated, as opposed to being so ego-driven and protective and isolated and fragmented, are going to have a different kind of life. I mean, it's a macro and microcosm, right? The way that we are individually in our head, and the way that we are in our company, and the way that our world expresses itself.
I think like what I've kind of landed on with this, and I'm in about probably 26 months now of like deep introspection around how do I want to show up in the world, and what do I want the next chapter of my life to look like. In the process of doing that, I left my job as a CEO. I basically didn't know what I was going to do, and even now I'm still trying to figure it out. But one of the big conclusions I've come to is there is, and I'm reading this book right now by I think his name is Michael Stringer, the Surrender Experiment. I might have got his last name wrong. Michael Singer, yeah.
Michael Singer.
Yeah, not Stringer, Singer. Sorry, Michael. I asked him to come speak at an event I'm doing, and he doesn't do that. So there you go. And you know what's funny is he asked people to come do stuff for him, and he surrendered, and they came. So I'm not done with you, Michael, if you're listening. Yeah, I'm at this point now where I'm just surrendering to I've gotten to the point where I've actually gotten so tired of my ego, where I'm like, man, you've gotten me this far, but now you're a monkey on my back, bud. You've worn me out. So when I went to Montana, I had actually burnt myself out over the last 6 months. And I have like a consulting coaching practice, which I started not even a year ago. And the pattern that when I was in a journey, I recognized was that I have like this massive achievers complex where I need to achieve. And it's really just like the dopamine hits. I'm like addicted to them, and I need them. And if I don't get them, I go and figure out ways to get them. Right. Mm-hmm. And here I was, like, exited my company. I literally have one employee and some virtual assistants, and I burnt her out and burnt myself out. And I was like, this is so fucked. Like, I was just like, I can't believe I did it again, because I had done it and it was just now, but I had a little bit of separation. And in the past, and I think entrepreneurs do this a lot, I had sacrificed for my company, right? And it's such an easy sword to fall on. Oh, but this is for the betterment of my company. And one day this thing's going to be this big thing. And it's okay that I don't see my kids for a month, or, whatever, all the bullshit we sell ourselves. And here I was literally doing the identical thing in like a individual consulting practice. And I was like, oh, this is exactly what I said. Fuck this. I'm done. Press the reset button. I went to my assistant after she tried leaving the company, and I said, please don't leave. And I said, listen, we have to change the way we're working. She'd worked for me for 3 years, but and she's a badass. I mean, Tiffany is a fucking badass. And I was like, I had successfully burnt her out. And I was like, this is not a her issue. This is a me issue. And this goes to what we're talking about before, and I think there's a lot of teams out there, and there's a lot of CEOs, which is why I love the work that you're doing. I think that there's this lie, that the rise and grind lie, that we need to be number one, and which mountaintop are you going to get on top of? And all this, I see all this shit in Instagram, and I fucking vomit in my mouth constantly now. I'm like, oh God, I got to change who I'm following. But I don't know. Like, so what are you doing? Like, what sort of tools and what sort of things are you doing to move people in this other direction, this more like humanitarian direction, because I really do believe that that is where the successful companies are going to be 10 years from now, are the ones that are embracing the style of leadership.
Yeah, and I don't want people to make the mistake of thinking that this is like just go hug trees and kumbaya, right?
No.
Right. This is actually what it's going to take to succeed. Because first of all, you have a population, you had younger people anyway who had said fuck that to rise and grind long ago. And now what you've just had in the pandemic, you have a whole world that's basically saying fuck that. So you're not going to be able to attract and retain people and build a company in that kind of culture anymore.
Yeah.
Anyway, I remember early on in pandemic, I had one coaching session. I mean, thankfully, I am really lucky to be able to only take on clients where we jive. I had one woman, I had one coaching session with, and that was it. And she basically said that they were in an essential industry, so they could still operate and have people come in. And I said, well, you're going to have some people who like won't be able to come in because of they're afraid, they have health issues, they have elderly parents. And I said, and it was a woman, and she's like, then they can just find another job. I don't put up with any of that. I don't put up with excuses. It's like, okay, sister. A little humanity.
Yeah. Good luck on that one.
Good luck on that one. Exactly. And by the way, one of the things she was coming to me for coaching for was wondering why there was so much conflict in her life.
That's the best. I don't know why everyone hates working for me. I'm a fucking asshole and hard to work for. I don't know what's wrong with them. You. I know what's wrong with them. It's not them. It's you.
And with all, like and there are people that will come in with that, and I can ask a couple of questions and people really stop and they go, oh, and they want to listen. And then there are just, and you're just not ready for it. Like, for God's sake, I mean, I know there have to be times in my life when I'm sure I did totally moronic things and somebody could have pointed them out to me and I would have been like, I don't know what you're talking about. Right. So, we all, like, when the time is right, we come to that. So what am I working on with people? I think it's that kind of awareness of how we can get more through less. I haven't written it up yet. I did an interview, this woman, Sasha Lala, who's awesome. And it's going to, if there's a piece that'll be written up, it'll be Napping Your Way to Success. And she talked about how she achieved the greatest success in her business by giving herself permission to take naps every day. Right? So, some of the things that I talk to people about that I love. So, for example, Darius, what you said is so common among entrepreneurs, that high achiever thing. People have two things. People have in entrepreneurship, from having worked with thousands of entrepreneurs, a few really common patterns I see are the high achiever thing, the hero thing, and the people pleasing thing. And the hero thing is like, you have to always be the hero and you have to always solve a problem. And what that turns into is when there aren't problems, somebody in that mode will subconsciously start to create problems so that they can step in and they can solve them. And the high achiever, there's just always bigger, better, more. And on the good side, a high achiever can lift up people up around them and bring them with them. But when it's on the sort of really heavy, dark side, the high achiever can railroad over people just that they can achieve their goals and can burn people out, like you described what happened with your assistant. So those are some of the kinds of conversations that I have with people. And people pleasing is the other really deadly one, of needing to make others around you happy, to the point of saying yes to more things than you intend to, and then winding up actually disappointing people. So these are three super common things that I see among the CEOs that I work with. And conflict avoidance, which can have many different reasons behind it. Conflict avoidance can be driven by people pleasing. Conflict avoidance can also be a way of trying to create control, right? So trying to be dismissive and shut people down. So to try to create control of situations, but also out of fear that fear that situation is going to spiral out of their control, and then people will like not be happy, and etc. So things I work with are deep explorations into those, seeing which ones of those resonate with them, to tie into what we're talking before. I'm a big believer in plant medicine in all of its variety of forms. And New and I have worked with recently, and I can't believe we're going to go this deep, but there you go. So something called Bufo, 5-MeO-DMT.
Oh, the frog.
The frog.
You've hung out with the Bufo frog?
I have hung out. I have. Indeed.
Wow. So I have a friend. I'm like, it's such a long conversation around my like experimentation with psychedelics, but it's pretty minimal just because I've been so afraid of them for so long. But I have a friend that has been really involved with journey groups for a long time, and he's done a lot of work on himself. It's made him he's dealing with a lot of trauma, and he told me he tried that. And he said it's like 30 seconds or 3 minutes or something like that. It's a really short period of time, but like you literally go to fucking outer space. Like it's like and there's a girl, I just read, it was funny. There was a girl, she had her and her husband, I can't remember his name, but they have a show on like HGTV. She's this blonde girl and she's married to this, like, they got divorced, but they were like this popular, like, HGTV, like home improvement couple. And I just read an article where she had basically used that medicine to cure her trauma. She said fully cured her trauma in like 15 minutes. Wow.
Somebody sent me that article too. Yeah, it's funny. So when I did it, actually, it was administered and supervised by a guy who is an MD psychiatrist. And I talked to him afterwards, and he said, I used to work with people with all the other kinds of stuff, he said. And then I discovered this, and it's like 10 years of therapy in 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's so the Michael Pollan group, especially for listeners that are like, are they talking about drugs? It's like, no, like this is, when you start to read the history of this is essentially this will, mark my words, be an entire pharmaceutical like empire, right? This is like, I'm convinced of it. The minute, like, and you already see legalization happening in places, I think Colorado and Oakland, California. But there's this will the what is it, the dogma around this, or maybe not the dogma is the wrong word, but this whole realm of plant medicine is picking up a lot of steam. MAP, M-A-P, have you heard of that organization down here in Austin?
Sure, like, MAPS, absolutely.
Yeah, so MAPS is doing a bunch of work with people. They're working with psychiatrists and psychologists that are like helping people. It gives them access to their subconscious, essentially. So did it help you? Did you feel like you were like, did you come out of it a changed person, or was it just kind of an interesting experience?
I think it is a continuum of change. This was about a month ago, and it's definitely, like, literally every day there's something to it. I've always been really intellectually based in my head, thinking through things and rationalizing things. And I've just got to a point in life where I realized that gets you so far, right? It's like, because ego's tied up in that, it gets you so far. And I love the intellectual side of things, like really love that. And at the same time, I realized there was just sort of a state of being that I wasn't fully connecting to. And so that's what I wanted to do. And it definitely has started to help with that. And that presence and that mindset they were talking about being able to just fully be in the present moment. Because it's not only when you can fully be in the present moment, right? Then we are less reactive, because every time we have a conversation with somebody, stuff is triggered. Our brain creates patterns, is looking for things. And so somebody looks at us a certain way and we make it mean something, but that's all in our brain. And it's all triggering stuff, right? And it leads to a lot of unhappiness, miscommunication, all kinds of stuff. And we can just be really here. What's here? Get curious. Be more open, we can be more effective. We can be happier and more effective as leaders, more effective as partners, better friends, better family members, and just happier.
Yeah, I love it. I have a really good friend that we were talking about this subject, and he was saying that essentially I don't know if it's neural pathways, but these patterns, these behaviors, that person looked at me, they must be thinking this, right? That's what the stories we were telling ourselves, these become pretty repetitive because it becomes efficient, right? So our brains are efficient. They want efficiency. They doesn't want to work as hard, right? And a lot of times when people start to, and again, there's many ways, meditation's one way of getting there, but this idea around consciousness, and psychedelics is just a more, I guess, intense way, or a more, maybe a more concentrated way to play with consciousness. But the analogy, I don't know where he got this from, but it's where you like look at like snow tracks, and that's like basically a fresh set of snow goes over the tracks, and your brain doesn't go back into those patterns. It maybe looks at things with fresh eyes. You're able to be in the moment as opposed to thinking about what you're going to say, because you're having that separation around being right and maybe being true, And so I love that from a leadership standpoint. And I do think that I'm excited to see the work that's coming out of this. I was talking to, I think this was on the show. I don't know if I want to say this because if it wasn't on the show, I'm not going to say who it was, but it was a really well-known author he's sold a few million books, and he's a friend of mine. And he had been experimenting with maps. He had been doing maps therapy, and it like changing his life. Like he's like, I'm going from a person that's literally been dealing with all these past issues in my life that is now like a better person, and he's like, it's changing his life in a dramatic way. So I'm pretty excited to see what's coming out of that side of the world. My mom is a psychotherapist, so I grew up with an LCSW as a mother. And I've always been pretty inquisitive about the mind, but yeah, I think the ego, it could get you so far, man. And like, it's to your point, like being an achiever or being someone that needs to win. It's like, it feels great to win. You're going to nice that fucking dopamine hit, shot in the arm. But at some point, when it's driving you to the point where maybe you're not happy, if you're not having joy, if you're not enjoying your days because you're rising and grinding for the win, I do think it's one of the world's biggest lies. And I think that it's a lie that when you get the win, that all will be good. And I think the truth actually is, if it's coming from a place of ego, at least from my own experience, is that the win is just a momentary lapse of happiness, and then you go back to the next win. And that sucks.
Totally. So actually, in the coaching that I do, there's a new program which I haven't unveiled yet, but it is about the 7 levels of happiness. I'm working with people because it has been absolutely heartbreaking, the amount of CEOs and founders that I'm working with who have stepped into creation. I mean, if you think about it, like you found a company, like you are creating out of, just fresh cloth. You are creating reality. And so many people in that position are unhappy and depressed and grinding, and they have a chance to create their life. When I was a little kid, my dad used to tell me this joke over and over and over and over. And the joke was, this guy goes to work, and you have to, put this in time perspective, right? This guy goes to work and he opens up his lunchbox and he goes, oh, liverwurst. I hate liverwurst. Monday. Tuesday, opens up his lunchbox. Oh, liverwurst. I hate liverwurst. Wednesday, opens up his lunchbox. Oh, liverwurst again. I hate liverwurst. Thursday, opens up his lunchbox. Oh, liverwurst. Finally, the guy sitting next to him says, why don't you tell your wife you hate liverwurst? And he looks at him and goes, I make my own lunch. This was the joke my dad told me over and over when I was too little, but he used to tell me it for years until one day I was old enough to realize what the message was he was trying to give me.
Oh my gosh. Is your sorry, go ahead.
Is what?
No, I was gonna ask, is your father still alive?
No, he's not, unfortunately.
Oh my God. No, I was like, your dad, you have so many great stories about him. Yeah.
But that's the thing, like we create our own reality, and we pack our freaking liverwurst sandwich every day, which we hate. What?
Yeah.
So, when I see that, and working with these entrepreneurs and founders, and getting to stop and say, okay, wait, what does happiness actually mean? I get to create reality. And if I can create a reality where I'm happier, everybody around me is happier, my family's happier, my team is happier, everything works better. So that's what lights me up about the stuff that I do. Something else I wanted to say, when you talked about, we're talking about these pathways to altered consciousness. While yes, all these things, in Oregon has just decriminalized basically all drugs, which is
that's
amazing.
That's right.
Portugal has. So as all this is happening, but there are still some people who are, a lot of people, right, who are going to be uncomfortable or afraid of these different substances, which I totally understand. Holotropic breath work is substance free and truly leads you into a completely altered state of consciousness. I mean, basically hallucinatory.
Is that the Wim Hof method type of breath work?
No. So Wim Hof, and it's funny because in Spy School, I work with a lot of Russians, and we have courses on breath control for how to control your psychology and physiology. And that's close to the Wim Hof, and it's very powerful. All Wim Hof did is there are ancient texts, and the Russians are the masters on this.
Really?
The Russian military, it's fascinating. The Russian military, they are so into all of the esoteric arts. It's super, super cool. So one of their specialties is breath, and they have volumes, books like this thick on just breath. So some of my Russian instructors had to convince me, because I thought breath control sounded boring, but they had to convince me, and breath control is definitely one of our most popular modules in all the Spy School stuff. But again, that's about controlling your physiology and your psychology, which is what Wim Hof does. With the Wim Hof stuff, you have to be really careful. Some of it's taught not super responsibly, because if you do it around water, people have died doing it. So he's just co-opted ancient methods and put his name on it. Good for him for marketing. But if anybody's interested, go find ancient Russian texts. They're amazing. Or come to us at Spy School and we'll teach you.
I love it. I have a friend, she's Bulgarian, she's on the show, and she teaches holotropic breath work. She's
that's different.
What's that now?
So that's different. The holotropic breath work is different. That's like a hallucinatory experience.
Right.
That's
different than the ancient Russian breath work. Okay, I'm going to check this out. So let me make notes. Is there anyone who you like that teaches that? Like anyone you recommend?
Yeah. My instructors at Spy School. That's where I learned it. Is from my instructors who I hired to teach other stuff, and they were like, "By the way, this is cool, and you should learn this, and we should teach this." So I don't know. I know I think they have actually a textbook called Breath. I would look that up. I'm happy to. I'll ask them if there are any other books that they recommend. I don't know. Truly, all I've learned is I've learned from them. But that's more of the how to use your breath to calm yourself down, to slow your heart rate, etc. I had a letter once from this guy, actually just posted something on my Facebook page. I posted a picture one day from Spy School, which I thought was kind of a boring picture. It's a picture of a bunch of people standing around breathing. But I said, hey, we're learning breath work. And some guy, Tom Bojarski from Charlotte, North Carolina, who had been through MI6 Academy, wrote something on my Facebook page. Oh my God, I took your class and that saved my life. And he wrote about how he'd been in some bike accident by himself, and he used what he had learned in the breath control section at Spy School to slow his heart rate down and control his physiology to give him enough time to get to the hospital. When he got to the hospital, the doctors were like, we don't know how you made it. He told them about the breath stuff, and he was like, that saved your life. So
wow.
So that's one form of breathing. But the holotropic breathing, truly, it's like a psychedelic experience.
Yeah, that's you're tapping into the subconscious. My gosh, Alana, what a treat as always. We're out of time. So Gosh, I love our conversations. Like literally, we just pounded through an hour and 5 minutes without even trying. Where can people find you? You're doing all these cool things, CEOs, groups that want to bring you in, whether it's forums or corporate organizations, or if people want to do Stiletto Spy School, where can they find you? How can they hook up with you? Give us the lowdown.
Yeah, my basic is alanawinter.com. So that's the super easy umbrella site for everything. So find me at alanawinter.com. My email is alana@alanawinter.com. Super easy. You can find me on all the socials, but that's the website's the main thing. And drop me a line. I'd love to hear from you.
All right, guys, you know where to find her. We'll put it in the show notes. Thank you guys so much for today. What a fun show with Alana, as always. I was so stoked to do part 2. I knew it was going to be this awesome, and it lived up to every ounce of my expectation and then some. So much gratitude for you, my dear. You were so awesome. Thank you. We're going to get out of here. All right?
All right. Thank you, Darius. Yeah, such a pleasure. Thank you. Honestly. Yeah. You're an awesome human. This is so much fun.
Well, guys, we'll talk to you soon. Peace out. Thank you.